Hey guys, welcome to the shop in Malibu. I'm going to be bouncing around from one shop to the next in this episode, but this episode has a strange clickbait title and it is called Strategically Planning Repairs. Now, some of you might remember that I worked on this Gibson mandolin bass from 1918, 1920, 1922 or so. And it took me the better part of a couple weeks of trying to get the back on this thing. Now this is thick wood. It has some cracks and some cleaning and some stuff to do. But I ultimately had to steam the back. And I think I'll put a couple of little clips of that in here so you can recall. If not, there's a playlist right up there right about now that talks a little bit about those kind of repairs. But today's episode is about looking at something and realizing what is a basket case. Well, the difference between a basket case and a project that comes out okay, playable, marketable, and something that sounds okay. Sometimes you have to really plan things out, and that's what this one is all about. We're going to look at an archtop guitar, in fact, this one up here, and we're going to look at a cello and maybe even a violin. But anyway, that said, let's get to work. Okay, this one's going to be full of spills and thrills, and we're starting off, that's right, with the autopsy cam, the overhead cam. So this is certainly going to be a winner. Shout out to my friends in Winter, South Dakota, cultural capital of the world. This, my friends, and if you're not my friends, still, is a cello. Now, it qualifies, whatever you want, to be on my channel, because it is indeed full of F-holes. It has an arched top and an arched back. These sides are not called sides, they're called spurs. Cowboy. Anyway, so if you're saying, hey, I came here to see archtop guitars, well, guess what? This specific cello is a 3/4 size cello, and it, as a person, as its own entity, predates the first archtop guitar by at least 125 years. That's right. So this thing is tore up from the floor up. So let's start here. There are similar parts. There's a big block up in this area right here. There is another block in the area down here where the tailpiece goes. The neck attaches here, and where the neck attaches, the sides or spurs are supposed to be attached here. You see that? It's sticking out there, and it's also sticking out a bit here. Not only is it sticking out, but you can see that there are cracks and splits here. So that needs to be fixed. And the worst part is right here, because this is broken and hooked around. And so pressing this down might cause this to break off. So that has to be fixed. Part of this sits against the head block where the neck is attached to. Part of it does not. So as we go down the body here, we'll see that there are parts right here that are loose from the body, and there's pieces of the spur or side still attached to the bottom. Up here, we have the top is coming loose from the spurs. Now, when you have top and bottom coming loose, I'm going to show you an arch top a bit later where the binding gassed off, which is kind of what this would be, this rib sticking out here. And when the binding goes from the top and bottom, everything holding the guitar kind of goes with it. So we need to stabilize one or the other. And I'm going to have to take the top of this off, but in order to do that, I'm going to have to attach the bottom to the spurs and make them stable, because once that's done, I have splits running down the spurs everywhere. Those have to be cleated from the inside, and I'm not going to do that while it's off the instrument. So now we get down into this area here. Let me get some room here. There is a big break right there that's going to have to be fixed. It's pulled away, and you'll notice that that will seal up just a little bit when I push this in. So all of this, look at how that wiggles. All of this has to be brought back into shape. The sound post is still in this thing. We've got some body separation going on right here. There's a bit of an indicator that there's been repairs done, and in fact, the information I have on this instrument says it was repaired once in 1744. Okay. But there's a crack there. It's along the edge. I can fix that with an edge clamp. And then also up in this area right here, there's another small crack that's originating from edge, which I can do with an edge clamp. I know you're asking, what is an edge clamp? An edge clamp has one of these and one of these, and when this is cut loose for a minute or two, you slip that in so this is equidistant between the crack, and then once these are clamped on and tightened up, then you turn this big one and you watch, and it will move that clamp. See, it is spring loaded. You see that? So it's moving in, and it will pull that clamp together. But once the back is on and the sides are stable, or the spurs, then we can pull the top off. So I got to do some preliminary work. Okay, so that is an edge clamp. We'll put that to the side for right now. So what do? Well, we need to take a couple of different little gadgets I have. You can buy these big rubber bands at pretty much any office supply. These come from a luthier supply. They're either closed both ends, or they sell them to you. You could use surgical tubing as well. You're going to need some of this stuff because we're not going to start clamping. We're going to use rubber bands and kind of loosely put those on. We're going to need some paper towels or some cloth. And we're going to want to moisten this stuff because, like, here's kind of the strategy. This here, you can see that it moves. It's dry. We don't want it to split. So when we pad this, we're going to moisten this, and not only will it keep the wood blocks that we're going to use to put rubber bands over, it will pad it, but it will also supply some moisture and let it soak into the wood. So while everything is sitting and getting back used to the way it's supposed to be, that's going to prepare us to glue this back on here. We're not going to do anything with the top, but anywhere where the spurs or the sides and the bottom are separated, we're going to want to take care of that. On the other side here, you can see that this is really bad. See that? And it's sticking way past out here. So we have to be careful, because we don't want to glue that on out here and have that much sticking out, because that means something's wrong somewhere else. So the main idea again is we're going to put some moisture to it and some padding. We're going to watch out. We do not want that to cut loose. So we're going to pad this and we're going to put some blocking on it. And the main thing we want to be concerned with is this sits down where it's supposed to be. There's some edging in there that's supposed to hold this in spot, kind of like a kerfing type stuff. So when that sucks into the bottom there, this pops out where it needs to be. But again, moist rags or paper towels, some blocks, and big rubber bands. This area right here, I'm going to make sure that I pull it in a little bit by going around things this way, because this sticking out that far is going to do something to the bottom. So let me work my magic. Alrighty then, let's have a look at what I did. Look at all these rubber bands. This big, thick green one, had I had this in elementary school instead of these rather stout one, yeah. No, if I would have had this green one in school, I would have been suspended for life. But we have wrapped these rubber bands all the way around the spurs. That's the size. That bag is there for a reason. There's little pieces in there, like the piece that's missing right here. You see that? But anyway, we went all the way around the spur or the sides with those rubber bands. Then what we did was knowing that the wood is dry, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here in a minute. Oh, by the way, I forgot to introduce you. How rude. This is Chick Flick Teal towel. I don't want to claim it as Chick Flick Teal tablecloth because I didn't have the graphic designer put my logo on it right here. How will that look? Imagine it, if you will, or if you won't. Anyway, I do need to let this out. I'm kind of bitter about this because every time I turn around, Chick Flick Teal Pointer is putting another relative on the show. The next thing you know, my payroll is nothing but going to support Chick Flick Teal Enterprises. Anyway, where was I? So you'll remember that the spurs were coming up right here, and there are a couple of cracks. The head block up here is underneath a couple of these cracks. So when this lays down, I will be able to glue those and everything will be fine. Now, it's really important that I connect either the top and or bottom, as I said before, to the spurs or the sides, because if the top is half off and the bottom is half off, the likelihood that you will have a good outcome and everything comes back together is low. Anyway, we took some toweling that was moist and put it in the areas where this needed to hydrate up in order to bend, because the last thing we want is these spurs to break across the grain. They can split all day long, but when they start breaking, here's the grain. When they start breaking this way, you have a problem. So there is no glue on any of this. There's just rubber bands pressing in and training this stuff where we want it to be. Over here on the side, same thing. That is separating there. We've got a split there that runs. This is actually one piece, another piece, another piece. But this was pulling or pushing out right here. And so I put a piece of blocking here to pull that back in, because when we push down up here, this is going to want to push out. We have everything lined up, and we're just going to let this get accustomed to this for a little bit before we do anything else. Now I want to show you a little trick. Any questions? None? Perfect. Okay, last thing I'm going to show you on this one is we have put this whole instrument inside of a big trash bag, the kind you put leaves on when in the fall when the trees start dumping and you start raking. But that's not all that's in here. We have these things, and you've seen these before. This is a cheap travel soap dish, so you don't just throw soap in your suitcase. You put it in one of these things and it opens up. And this is an Cello sponge, not another kind of sponge, but Cello fits in here perfectly inside the cheap soap dish. Now, do you see something? There are holes in there. There's a geoprismatic pattern here, and I drilled these holes in here. And then if you put the sponge in here and wet it, the sponge will release moisture through the atmosphere by way of these holes right here. So let me do a little scientific experimente, because now I'm going to tell you about this moisture meter and this piece of mahogany. They make guitar parts out of mahogany. Probably not the bridge, the strings, or the tuners, probably not, but other parts. Now, if you let wood dry out, it tends to crack, thus the problem with this instrument in the bag. So ashamed, covered its headstock in a bag. We pull out the moisture meter, and oh, it's skyrocketing to 2.1%. It's floating back and forth between 1 and 2.1%. Just saturated. Now we take our same said moisture meter and we put it on our handy dandy gadget, and oh yeah, look at that. Guess what? This is going to go through these holes and go into this bag, and there's a few of these in the bag, and we're going to leave this sit in a cool place, not in the sun, but in a cool place, and we're going to raise the humidity on this fine instrument right here. Let's go to a different instrument now, because all this stuff kind of is the same regardless of the instruments. Okay guys, moving right along. I really like this guitar. This is an old K150, and I think I did an episode or two about one of these up here. Where is it? Yeah, up there somewhere. Is it up there? This camera has me all confused. Anyway, this is a late 40s, early 50s model, and it has its pickup. In fact, it has its wiring harness still intact inside, and it's got this thing here. You see that? That used to be up here. Volume, tone, everything was right here. Now, if you get one of these, it's going to fall apart. So you basically trace it out, and that way when it comes time, you can build another one out of something, and we're going to see how much leeway I have on that, because this is actually somebody else's guitar. I have one like it, but I'll show you one difference. Now, what happened to this guitar? Well, it's a high quality guitar. It's got some checking on the finish and stuff, but this was actually somebody's guitar, and they put their name on it and they were proud of it and whatever. But like so many of Grandpa's guitars or Dad's guitars, they end up being passed on, and then they got a nice case, and you get them and you look at them and you wonder what got played on them, how it was used, the history of it, and then sooner or later they're forgotten and they're put in a closet in their cases. And the big thing is somebody forgets to loosen up this string tension and forgets to put one of these in there to keep some moisture in there. And the next thing you know, the binding gases off. You see that there? And the next thing you know, it gets so dry that the neck will just come right off. So let's take a look at what this is. I like this model. Look at it. It's got that stripe on the back, quality workmanship. The tuners are all still here, but that is the next step down from there's a K, the model of it escapes me. Sherwood, that's what it is. This is just like a Sherwood. It just doesn't have the Sherwood, but this is a quality guitar, fret markers, everything. This is a top of the line neck. Now what I like about this is even though the binding has gone bad on the guitar, the binding on the neck is okay, and that's going to help us out. So let's set this aside in a safe place and see what's going on with the body, because that's where our concern is. So the body has dried out and the binding has gassed off, which means you can see it right here. It's just crumbling. Now this stuff is celluloid binding and it's certainly not good to breathe, but it has broken away and it starts off doing little chips like this. Again, don't breathe this stuff. But the next thing you know, it's all gone. Now, the dangerous part about this is that the binding actually helps hold the sides and the top and bottom. And you can see right here that there's a gap right there. You see that? There's an air gap. And the bad thing that's happened here is the neck pocket where the body has separated. You see that? And it's moving up and down a little bit. So what are we going to do here? Well, strategically, on a guitar like this, it's just kind of like that cello we looked at. You do not want the top or soundboard and the bottom to be detached at once, because that leaves the sides, which are pretty thick on this guitar. You can see it, but that leaves everything floating around. You'll never see them get put back together. So what I'm going to do with this one is we're going to get this neck pocket back into shape and glued up where it goes. And by doing that, you can see that this will slip right back in. And it's just a matter of putting some hide glue there. But before I do that, I'm going to take the shims out of it and get this all cleaned up. And we'll get this stabilized and ready to take the neck back in. Now, it's good that I didn't have to steam the neck off, because that involves, while we're here, let's take a look. This goes here. To reach that pocket, I would have had to pull this fret right here. So let's take a look at that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 would have got me right to that neck pocket right there. If I would have went back into here, I would have missed it and drilled a bunch of holes in this. But as dry as this thing was, a couple things would have happened. The steam would have pulled even more of this apart, and I don't care how careful you are, steaming up these old fretboards is going to make things mushy and soft, and there's always an effect. But strategy on this one is, again, we're going to file and do whatever we need to do to get this to sit nice and flat. Make sure everything's okay. Clean this out, steam this up a little bit, get this glue off of here, and then we are going to do a binding job. And what that involves is, I've already cleaned out the binding channel, and there's actually a binding channel here that some big binding fits into, and you basically take and pull the binding around. You want to make sure that your binding is not old, even your replacement binding, because if it's been sitting around and hot and cold, you may be starting off with a bad product to begin with. So I have some brand new binding, enough to do the top and bottom. Now it's pretty thick, so I'll have to do some cutting. And then I also have what's called purfling. This stuff is very thin. You can use wood, you can use binding material, you can get it in different colors, you can alternate it. But this smaller stuff is what goes in what we're calling the purfling channel here, which is small, right up here. Stuff's trying to jump out of the way here. I don't want to break it. But it sits in here, and it comes up to the level. Let me pull this here. You see that? So it gives you that look. You can pick a different color. You can do whatever. I'm actually going to put in the binding and get it in shape before I do the purfling. Now, putting this in, use glue, use the appropriate glue, and then I have this thing, and this right here is binding tape. So you just pull a bunch of these, you get them ready. I've done an episode, I'll give you a link to it up there right about now. I think, I'm so confused when this thing is shooting the overhead autopsy cam, but you just put these together. But I've done a video where I did an old Archcraft. I replaced the binding, and that shows you everything to do. But you're basically putting a little glue on after you get this filed down. You're putting the glue on, and then you're taking your binding tape like so and pulling it tight, and then you go all the way around and you get that in shape. Now, do not pull all the binding off the top and bottom at the same time, because you'll see once we get this neck pocket in shape and the binding on, the top will get nice and firm again, and then and only then will we go around and pull what's left of this off and do the same thing. And then I think we're going to be pretty solid The back of this is pretty much okay, except where the binding has come completely off. So you can see what I'm talking about here with no side binding. This is ready to go in. I'm going to have a look inside and make sure that the kerfing is glued good, and in fact where there's spots like this, before I start I can take my glue needle and drop some in there and make sure everything is okay, and then the binding will stiffen everything up. Like I said, fortunately it's all here. It's got the input jack, but we can expect that this kind of stuff that's made out of this celluloid is not going to be good. But there we go. You're going to see more of this one. But again, neck pocket, stabilize top binding, go to the back, stabilize that with new binding, top and bottom done separately, then put the purfling in last, and then do the rest of it. Let's move on. All right, guys, if this sign fits, it's on this one. Welcome to our next victim. This is a Marwin Gotham, like Gotham City, like Batman. And this one is, I would bet, even though the stuff on the inside isn't there, is from 1940, 41, or at the latest 42. And here's what tells me that. First, it's got a wooden tailpiece that doesn't wrap around to the end. You see that? This is wood. The binding on this thing is only on the top, not on the bottom. Everything is pretty tight here. Now, this one, if there were one to take the back off of, this would be the one. Fortunately, the neck seems to be pretty stable, and the neck angle isn't that bad. Sometimes the best way to correct a bad neck angle is to realize that this part of the top is breaking loose and pulling in, which is causing the neck angle to come up and high action. But if we stick our finger in here, there's the telltale tone braces, which means sometimes this stuff starts to sink and cut loose, especially on the base side, which is where our big structural cracks are here. Now, this one is actually pretty easy. I'm going to take everything off of it, and realizing that there's really no reason to take the back off yet, but also understanding that these cracks are horrendous. Somebody has tried to glue them before, and they are pretty significant. So I got to take some steam. We're going to get that glue off of there, and then we're going to take our friend, or a smaller one like it, the edge clamp, right? Remember this? And we can put this on here like so. You got to be careful here, but this is a perfect example. I tighten this down and this down, and once I get them level this way, then I can turn this one, and you can see that it's actually pulling everything together. So this is actually a pretty easy fix. These are violin, cello maker tools. They're expensive, and they come in different sizes, but you certainly want to have one of these in your toolbox. Other than that, it's just a little bit of touch up. I like this guitar because there's a guy in a band named Crushed Out. He has one like this, same brand name, and he's playing a song called Shake Can Well. I'm going to give you a link to it. And it's actually, the words are the warning label off a can of WD-40. So let's set this one aside and move on to our next victim. This is actually one of the easiest ones we've seen. Okay, little case, giant surprise inside. Any of you that have been watching me for a while know what's in here. Nothing like a good case for your valuable stuff. This is the miniature version of the Mando bass that you saw at the beginning in the open of the episode. This is a Gibson mandolin from about 1918, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. But when I started off with this one, it had been stained a bunch, and you could literally press down, and there are cracks here. There are a couple of cracks on the side, and there's a piece here that's a little bit wonky, and the only way, there's a big crack right there. This had been cracked in the back for quite some time, and this had been hanging on a wall drying out because I think somebody gave up on these is what happened. So we'll pull the rubber bands off of here, and we will find what I've been working on it with. Check it out. We've got what we're using to pull the old finish off, some very fine sandpaper. This brace here actually fit on the top right here. But here's what was done to this. First off, we had to take the back of it off. Now, while this is going on, a couple things for you to understand. Whether it's a Mando bass or they made Mando cellos, which look like a guitar. They're L series from the teens and early 20s were arch tops with an oval hole. They didn't have F holes back then, but in order to get to this, I had to pull the back. Pulling the back went okay. Heated up a good knife. Most of the kerfing was messed up or broken, so a lot of it got replaced. And then I just put some cleats in here and sanded everything down here because this is where that brace goes. Okay, but getting this part off of here was a nightmare. And if you don't know, yeah, there's a cleat right there. This was also a perfect candidate. I know I'm bouncing around here, but these cracks that are here, again, you just put one of these on, tighten it up. Now notice I've got softeners here, but you just tighten these up like so, and then you just turn this and it will actually pull the cleat or the crack closed like so. Can't tell you how badly you need one of these, and also a finger plane, because that helps on stuff like this. But this part here was a nightmare to get off. And there's a locating pin right there. The Mando bass had one. They all have one. So if you're in here prying and stuff and you feel like you're hitting something, you are hitting the locating pin. Okay, when it comes time to put this together, I'm going to make sure that just like you do a floating bridge on top, when it comes to that brace inside, you want to put some some sandpaper under there and make sure that that brace, which by the way is kind of the opposite of a bridge, see it's curved. You want to make sure it doesn't have any cracks or anything like that. You can tell the way it was in because when they shot the varnish in on it in the factory, you can see where everything hit the hardest and where it dripped around onto the back. You can see that. Again, always have a parts bag. I did a video episode about using these canvas totes when you start a project to put your parts in and keep it with the thing. Because if you got projects going on forever it comes time you can't find the stuff. And if you're looking for a brace for a pre-1920 Gibson mandolin or the tuners or whatever, I have all the parts for this thing, you are in deep trouble when it comes to the value of your instrument. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've got everything done with the finish that we took off. Somebody had already fixed this. And then we're going to take some period correct clamps after we glue up everything. These are so cool. I just like showing them to you more than anything else. And we're just going to put some hide glue on there because we really don't want to glue it in a way if we can't take it apart at some point in the future. That's not going to be good. But again, I got some period correct violin clamps, and once we get the glue on there, we'll tighten up everything. And I got two more. I'm not going to bore you with that, but there we go. So one more time, summary on this pre-1920 Gibson mandolin. It had cracks on the top, a crack on the bottom. The finish on it was horrendous because somebody had tried to hide it. You could basically move this stuff. Binding was gone off the top. Took the back off, took the stain off, put some cleats in it, got rid of all this stuff, sanded it down, put new kerfing in it, and it is ready to be glued back up. Now, I got a big surprise for you with the last one. Okay guys, this one is killer. This is a 1918 Gibson L4. It is, if you look at it, it's got the same trim, the same shape on the fingerboard as the mando bass, the mandolin, and this is awesome. Look at that. There's just a tiny piece of the S missing here, right there. I have the original tuners for this. I have the original bridge, the tailpiece, which by the way was kind of a Bakelite thing and they wrote it away. But I've got all the original parts for this, which is incredible. The label is still inside of it. But here's the issue. By the way, you saw this in an episode called Easy Come, Easy Go. I actually traded the Gretsch 1954 Electromatic up there, I think is the episode, if there's a card left. But why are we talking about this one? Well, let's look at it. The binding is still here, believe that or not. You see that? There's just a little piece missing there. And if I take some old binding and I mix it with some acetone and make a putty out of it, I can actually make a patch. But it's really important that I get the right binding there. Now, there has been some repairs on this thing in the past, and you can see them, but here's the big one. Let me make sure we can see what's going on. If you look closely, there is a crack that runs from here all the way to here, and it's a twisting crack, meaning if you pull it together, one side wants to come over the other one and the other one wants to open up. But that crack runs through the heel of the neck right there. And someone has tried to put some glue in this in the past. Now that crack is pretty substantial And there's a lot of wood missing right there, if you see it. So, what do we do with this? Well, let me lay it down first, and I'll talk to you as I babble on about this. Let's say that I just put a clamp right here and I squeeze this back together. Well, there's an offset right there, okay? And I have to pay attention to what I'm doing here. Fortunately, I can get my hand in here and I can feel that the head block in here is not cracked, but I can tell where the glue was put in before. So the main thing I want to do is get these cracks lined up. I don't want to sand them. You don't sand this down here. We're going to get it level, and that is sometimes pretty easy to do with a set of these. These magnets here, you can put pieces of tape on them, or parchment paper works good if you don't want the glue to stick to them. And then I just basically put this, knowing where the polarity is, on the inside, like so, and I can just move that around to wherever I want, and I can feel when I hit a brace, because you'll hear it trying to jump. But I can move this around like so. Be careful with your finish. Tape these up. They will pick up. If you live in an area where the soil's magnetic, like black sand where gold was, watch out for that. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some steam, and I'm going to make sure that over the years nothing has gone in there. I'm going to pull this off, and then I'm going to drill a hole and put a dowel through it once I get this where it needs to be, and then I'll squeeze it closed and glue it, and then these will all have to come together at the same time. Then once that's all done, I'll get my touch-up paint kit out, and we will hide all of these previous repairs and put the hardware back on it. But I've got quite a few guitars around. The main thing to think about with these things is, number one, what is this worth? I'll leave that up to you. Is this guitar worth doing what I'm going to do to it? Of course it is. Is the Marwin? Not really. What about the KK150? Of course it is. Someone's grandfather had that guitar, and they're going to be happy to have it back and playable. So kind of know what the end game is. Don't lose your ability to enjoy the work and appreciate your skill set as it goes. So let's take a look at that Mando bass again as I close this out, and kind of notice that there's a lot of the same kind of thing. Somebody took a small guitar, mandolin, and just made it progressively bigger by making the parts bigger. All right, are you thinking about that project you have and asking yourself, number one, what am I doing that for? Is there going to be an outcome? So you can get rid of that problem right away by planning things out, strategically looking at, if I know I'm going to have to take the top off or the back off, do I have it to stabilize the sides, the spurs, whatever you call it, and step by step know where you're going. When you start taking the back and sides and top off at the same time, the likelihood that it's all going to come back together and line up as it was intended to in the beginning decreases markedly. So I really have enjoyed, number one, the opportunity I had to work on this mandol bass, because there's not that many of them left around. And at the end of the day, your skill set is only as good as the experience that you're allowed to have. So hey, thanks for watching. Give me a like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you soon.